are you familiar with like the problem of evil, I'm guessing?
Problem of evil.
Yeah, what's your answer to it?
Part of the answer to it is at least the problem of good. Why is there so much good in this world if there's so much chaos, if there's so much disorder, if there's so much entropy, right? If there's so much that just dissolves and falls apart, why is there still evil in the world? And I think if you're going to call something crooked, you have to have an idea of what a straight line is, right? So you're getting at, well, there is objective. This world is crooked. So that's a problem. Well, then I must know that there's something that's straight. And clearly that begins the question, okay, you're wrestling with good and evil.
So, like, for me, I would say, like, I tend to be more, like, I don't know if there is an objective morality that I can claim to. I tend to presuppose certain things. For example, like, an axiom I'll try to maximize is I think we should try to benefit, like, human well-being in terms of quality of life and quantity of life. And generally that means trying to maximize pleasure, minimize pain, like, doing what's best for society. So that's what so I don't know if I necessarily say there's objective right and wrong.
When Adam and Eve rebelled and decided to play God, all havoc broke loose. It wasn't just them. Obviously, there accounts for there is an enemy. There is Satan. That's a force of evil in the world that is not only impersonal but destructive, that lies and steals and kills and destroys.
Right. You're saying most of the suffering we see today would be, in your view, a combination of two things, like Satan and the fall and the chaos that introduced, and then also like human free will, right? I guess, like, do you believe in some form of like heaven or afterlife? That is,
Absolutely.
and like, would you say that's like the maximum amount of like good or pleasure we'd be able to experience? How would you describe that?
More immeasurably good than I could ever imagine. But the problem with that, I feel like, is, well, is that some comfort to people who are suffering here and now? I mean, we would have to say yes to a degree, but at the same time, it's like, well, why is that still going on?
Right now, we have free will in the like material world, and there's suffering as a result of that. We seem to agree on that. I'll grant you that free will exists, and that can lead to bad things.
Right.
But then you say heaven is like the highest good, right? And you kind of dodge the question as to whether or not free will exists in heaven. So it would seem that if free will exists in heaven, then there's also suffering in heaven. Or if free will does not exist, then there is some way to maximize good here without free will that God has chosen not to engage in.
I think part of the exciting thing about heaven is that it's not just a new heaven up in the sky. It's also this earth. And that's the radical message of it, particularly in the New Testament, is that the kingdom of heaven is within creation, is within you. That's what Jesus said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And this earth is not going to be tossed out. That's why we have to care for it, is because this will be a new earth as well.
Are you an atheist or agnostic?
I don't think they're mutually
It needs to go back on
exclusive.
him, Rob.
I would say agnostic atheist. Like, the way I've heard it explained is atheism or theism is a claim to, like, belief. Gnosticism or agnosticism is like a claim to certainty. So I would say my belief in God is the same as my belief in aliens. I don't think, like, it's impossible for God to exist. I just haven't seen evidence that suggests it does, and therefore I don't believe it.
If there is no God, the majority of atheists, scientists that I know, would say we are predetermined, we are determined as human beings, and it just appears like we have free will.
Right now, I don't think any of us, or I guess you would claim to, like, none of us can know for certain whether we have free will, in my view. I think we act as we do on a day-to-day basis for the same reason we act like we can know about the external world. Because if
How can you not know that you have free will, that you're about to go to class? And it's your choice to go to class and not somehow behaviorism or your own neurochemicals. Do you truly think that you don't have free will? How can you stand here and say that we don't know if we really have free will or not? I mean, you know that, man, in your lived experience. Get out of the brain in the vat And in your lived experience, are you actually going to say that you don't have free will to make that choice whether to go to class
So
or not?
it depends on the conversation I'm having. So this, I'm probably going to say no because I'm assuming we're having like a philosophical conversation.
No, we're not just having
Okay.
we're having an existential, but we're also having a
Sure.
type of very nitty-gritty,
Okay.
experiential conversation. I don't want to live in the clouds. I don't think you
Yeah.
do. We want to live in the pragmatic, mundane type of
I'll
world,
bet.
reality.
I'm an atheist, and I think we have free will.
How?
Okay, sure.
Explain that.
Because
I
I
gotta
think
run.
our environmental factors and genetics give us a predisposition towards certain behaviors. But at the same time, I do think. Sorry, my allergies.
All right. Keep going.
Fire
Doing
it.
well.
I think we have a certain predisposition towards certain behaviors, but at the end of the day, I think it's definitely based on our choices. Because, like, for instance, if you come from a broken family,
Yes.
like, that can influence you to either continue the cycle or it
Right.
can make you say, you know what, I want to be better than this.
Right.
To break
But
you
how
out of
can
it.
you have free will if all you are is chemicals evolved to a higher order? There's no you if there is no God. There's matter and energy. You're a complex compilation of matter and energy, but there's no you. There's no soul. There's no free will. There's no consciousness. You just exist as a complex biochemical reaction.
Like, because God knows past, present, and future. So wouldn't that disprove free will if He already knows what's going to happen?
God has chosen to partially limit his power by giving us a free will.
Just the fact that He knows everything that's going to happen already suggests that our will isn't entirely our own.
But when we say that God knows that everything's going to happen, what we mean is God is outside of the dimension of space and time. God is eternal. He's outside of the dimension of time that you and I are locked into. So due to his perspective outside of time, he sees past, present, and future at a glance. Now, I don't understand what I just said to you. Why? Because I'm locked into time. But God is not a slave of time. God is outside of time. He's eternal. He can see everything at a glance. It means you and I can still have free will, even though God sees the future. Now, what do you think about Jesus Christ?
I think he was a real dude, but I don't think he had any sort of magical powers or anything.
All right, but the historical evidence is that 3 days after he died, he rose from the dead.
So the only historical evidence we could possibly have is anecdotes. And
Why is that?
So how would we record that?
Well, is it an anecdote that Washington was first president of the United States? Is it an anecdote that John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln? Or is that historical knowledge? Is it an anecdote that Dr. Martin Luther King got assassinated? And the evidence is Jesus died, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead. Great question. Yes, sir.
So this was a hypothetical. Actually, can we go back to free will for a second?
You raise whatever you want.
Yeah.
Let's go fast. Go.
Yeah, awesome. How, just so we were sharing like common ground, how
Yes.
would you define free will? Is there a way you could define it for like absolute God? just
Free
as a
will
concept?
means you're an autonomous individual
Yep.
who makes your own decisions.
What do you mean when you say makes your own decisions?
You decide what you're going to do. You decide whether you're going to go to class or stay here. You decide whether you're going to respect me or be disrespectful. And I do the same.
So-
I can walk away, I can be disrespectful, or I can be respectful.
So is it fair to say then, like free will, you could define it as if I were to be able to observe like every molecule around you right now, or you, I still wouldn't be able to predict with perfect certainty what you would do next. Like
That's
it's-
correct. You cannot take my chemical makeup and say, you have to do this tonight.
Sure.
Because I don't have to. None of you have to do whatever you're going to choose to do tonight. You have a free will. Now, guys, if anybody says to you that's wrong, you look them in the face and say, I'm sorry, my experience of life is I don't have to love, I can hate. I don't have to respect people, I can be disrespectful.
Isn't that just an argument from intuition though?
It's an argument from experience. I'm appealing to your
What's the
experience.
difference? Can you explain the difference? Because it seems
No, I can't.
Okay.
I'm just saying, because I'm talking to a large group of people who have experience.
Sure.
And I'm saying, come on, guys, wake up and smell the coffee. You know you have free will because you experience it on a daily basis.
But there's a lot of concepts people like had beliefs about that we now know, or at least think are incorrect based on what we've discovered. Like there's a litany of beliefs about like disease or natural phenomena that people were like, my lived experience tells me it's this way. We find out later at a point in time that's actually not.
Sure,
So
that's
intuition
happened.
can be deceiving.
Yes, that's happened, but you can't live your life as if somewhere down the road they're going to discover that I'm not standing here. Yeah, you can't live that way.
Sure. That's why there's a separation between like academia and like really dense philosophy and like I don't know what I'm doing right now. Like I'm gonna go walk to my Spanish class and learn about grammar. Like
Yeah,
there's a
and every
difference
philosophy professor has to go home and decide, am I going to love my spouse or hate my spouse? Am I going to be respectful to my spouse and children or not? So we all have to live our lives.
Sure.
And when we put our heads on the pillow at night, all of us have faith. All of us have a meaning in life that either we've accepted from God or we've constructed on our own. That's inescapable for all of us. That's your life. It's my life.
For me, what would it take to believe the claim today that somebody rose from the dead 3 days later? Because that, to me, is a pretty extraordinary claim that doesn't seem to line up with what we observe throughout human history. It seems like there's this one instance, and it hasn't really happened since in thousands of years.
Right.
So it seems pretty implausible, given what we know, for that to happen.
It's an amazing claim, right? And so what's the criteria for seeing what the evidence is of the reliability of that said claim, right? First of all, it wasn't a secret. It was made public. It was a public claim. Over 500 people claimed to have seen Jesus risen from the dead. It's not just Christian writers who wrote about this. There's also plenty of Jewish historians, Roman historians, and others who wrote about this. So you have to then ask yourself the question, well, what would it take? Would it take a picture, a before and after picture of Jesus dead and then Jesus alive to prove that he rose from the dead? Would it take a video? Would it take him doing it right now?
Like, a guy dies, I'd want, like, vital signs. Like, when he dies, I'd want, like, observations while he's dead, and then I want vital signs measured after he wakes up. And I'd probably want it to be reported on by multiple news outlets and other sources across the spectrum. So it's not like a small group of people where there could be biases, influence of drugs, other sorts of
mass hallucination.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Right. So you're wanting multiple eyewitnesses who have a somewhat of a cohesion to their testimony of what actually happened. Do you not have that, not only with the Apostle Paul, not only with Tacitus or Josephus or Suetonius or Flavius or Pliny the Younger or any of these other guys? Do you not have that in these thousands of people who actually went to their death, who were killed for claiming to have seen Jesus rise from the dead? That's a lot of people.
The tools they had at their disposal in terms of just observation, like just being able to see something without the use of a lot of the methods and tools we have today, is pretty hard for me to buy that claim because there are a lot of things that you cannot observe externally, especially in matters like bodily function, that you're not able to garner.
See, I have a hard time with that objection because I feel like it is a type of chronological snobbery in the sense of, do we really think the Roman Empire didn't have a good way of killing people? They perfected it, right? It was the crucifixion, beheadings, all sorts of that. They jammed a spear in Jesus' side and they saw a watery clot come out of him, suggesting massive heart failure. He died. Two people, Josephus and another guy, Nicodemus, or Joseph of Arimathea, they wrapped his body, put him in a tomb. He was dead. Then they had Roman centurions. They conquered the known world at that time, posted to guard the body. They had people there, not just two or three, not just people on drugs. These were trained killers. These are the soldiers, these are the special forces of the Roman Empire, right? So they knew he was physically dead. Then they had heard of a prophecy that he would rise 3 days later. So they put even more soldiers there. They spread it out through Jerusalem that this was gonna be the disciples were gonna steal the body. So they had all these angles, like you asked it as far as your request of multiple media sites, this and that, of physical criteria of them. So Jesus then rose from the dead. He appeared to his disciples, appeared to other people, ate with them, talked with them, walked with them. So I don't know what else you would want.
I guess I gotta go here in like a minute. But yeah, I guess, I mean, if y'all are around later, I'd be happy.
There are a lot of aspects of the Bible. Let's say, okay, just to preface this, if you sin every day, you're going to hell, is the general consensus,
No.
right?
False.
False.
I sin every day. He sins every day. Okay? We put our faith in him. He's given us the gift of eternal life. Now, do we change? Yes. We sin less. But sir, to think that I don't sin every day is naive. It's a very superficial, trivial view of sin.
So if you do it your way, you get tortured. If you listen to God, then you don't get tortured.
No, I don't think hell is best defined as torture. I think it's best defined as separation from God, which is total emptiness. And yes, there will be suffering, because I will be totally separate from the being who is good and who gave me this good gift of life.
There is no justice, there is no good, there is no hope, there is no love.
Correct.
Is what hell is.
That's right. You do not enjoy. There'll be no party in hell.
I'm not
No
saying
good
there'll be a
times in
party
hell.
I'm asking what there is in hell. If someone wants to stay in hell, then they found something positive in hell. And
The rich man in hell is saying, send Lazarus to warn my relatives, and also send him to give me something to give me relief from this. And he's still, while he's in hell, he's still giving out orders to God, to people, and he's basically saying, I'm the one you have to follow. Does that make sense?
But he's not given a name. He's just given the name
It's
rich man.
impersonal. It's
So there's no direct name, and that's the only case in all of the New Testament where you actually get that. So what does that mean? He's lived for money. Money is his God. And so what does he say? I'm uncomfortable down here, and yet I still want to stay in hell. That's the interesting thing about hell. I am comfortable down here because I definitely don't want to serve in heaven. I don't want to have to worship any type of God who tells me I have to live a certain type of way. And yet at the same time, it is uncomfortable.
And since all things positive come from God, doesn't that imply that God has some influence on hell?
Well, of course God has some influence on hell. He's the ultimate judge. But
Isn't
in
the-
hell, we're going to be separate from the God who we never wanted to live together with.
If you
See, an atheist doesn't find God for the same reason a criminal doesn't find the police. He's running away. An atheist doesn't find God, not because there's not enough evidence that God doesn't exist. An atheist doesn't find God because they got the same problem I do. Arrogance and rebellion against God. And therefore, intellectually, we get blinded because we choose to shake our fist at God and say, I will be God. I'm not going to submit to you. I'm going to do my own thing. I resent you.
I mean, aside from the fact that that philosophy is pretty much what founded America, you're saying, I'm not saying what God is and what God isn't. I'm saying when I do go down there, when hell, supposedly.
Yes.
Now, I'm not a particular sinner, but since I have abandoned all faith in God, I will go down to hell. It's what you
Well,
said.
I am a particular sinner. I've lusted, I've been greedy, I've been proud and arrogant, I've been mean, I have gossiped, I've slandered, so I am a sinner in desperate need of God's grace. Maybe you're different, but sir, I've spoken on university campuses now for over 40 years, and I've only met one student, he happened to be a student at MIT, who claimed to be sinless. And when this MIT student said, I've never sinned, all of his MIT classmates burst into laughter. Why? Because they knew that all of us have sinned. We know that. We experience guilt.
I'm just confused. You said what isn't in God. You said that the rich man actually enjoys hell. He's like,
No.
He
Rich
says
man
he's
does not enjoy hell.
You said that he's uncomfortable there, but he still wants to be there. Like, I
He
don't
has
like math class.
chosen
Doesn't
to
mean I
be
don't want
there
to be
by
there.
living his life separate from God. He wants to get out of there, and he doesn't want his siblings to come there.
In hell, there is no influence of God. Or at least once you get into hell, God
Right.
doesn't do anything. He's
Correct.
separate. So in hell, it's just pure free will. Complete and utter free will. Because there's no one to interfere. There's no higher order telling you what's good, what's bad, what's just, what's unjust. It's just people. That's what hell is, essentially.
We don't know that many details about hell. The Bible doesn't describe it with that kind of specificity. Okay? So I don't know exactly what's going on in people's minds and hearts in hell. We don't know that.
So what you're saying is, if you bow down to a supreme being, then you get to have a good life, and if you choose free will, then you have a bad life.
No. I freely accept Christ because I see the evidence is he's reliable. I don't bow down to him because I need to genuflect. I bow down to him because I acknowledge he is God. My buddies bow down to money. The majority of my buddies bow down to materialism, physicalism, materialism, money. All right? I insist it is far wiser to worship Jesus Christ than it is to worship a large stock portfolio. But everybody worships, everybody bows down, everybody submits.
So, you need to submit to God in order to go to heaven, correct?
No, you need to put your faith in Christ, and he saves you by grace. Then, as a result of your genuine love for Christ, you will seek to obey him, and yes, in a sense, you will submit to him. But to submit to him does not mean you cross off your mind, you just blindly believe. It does not mean that. It does not mean that you don't have a lot of existential ethical decisions to make, and you just submit. No, it's not a blind submission. It's eyes wide open. The evidence is Jesus Christ is reliable, and therefore I'm going to obey him with my sexuality, my money, my power, my career, my life.
2022 years ago,
Okay.
the historical records, while they are mostly complete, you can't really verify that he was actually dead. You can't really verify much about that time. Again, even if you do prove that Jesus was real, which he was, historically speaking,
Right.
you can't prove that he was the Son of God. Again, God didn't grace the earth, just Jesus.
I mean, do you need him to put in skywriting? Do you need like a picture? Do you need a video? Like, because it could all be photoshopped or altered.
No,
So just because it happened 2,000 years ago doesn't mean we have to be suspicious about it. I think Socrates was a real guy. I think Alexander the Great was a real guy. Obviously, you've acknowledged Jesus Christ is a real guy, real person. So now the next step is, well, is he who he claimed to be as the Son of God?
When I was a kid, I lived about, I think, 4 miles away from this like mental institution. There was a guy over there who claimed to be the Son of God too. Doesn't mean I believed him.
Good.
Why?
Because he's in a mental institution. The guy clearly is insane. Back then they didn't have mental institutions. How do I know Jesus didn't belong in one?
Why do you think there were so many Messiah movements at the time of Jesus Christ, as in like hundreds, and they all petered out? Like Bar Kokhba was one of them, but Christianity ended up taking over the whole Roman Empire and then spread to the whole known world, and now 35% of the world is Christian, based off of that historical event, the resurrection.
I agree that he died.
Okay.
And then I don't think he came back.
Okay.
I don't think his first death was a real death because
Okay.
it wasn't proven to be a real death.
Okay, proof. Let's define proof. First of all, there's microscopic amounts that you can prove, even in the great US of A. Secondly, no one really agrees what exactly the term even means. So let's use evidence, historical evidence. No, empiricism, no, that also gets to more scientific types of evidence. So, historical evidence. One, the head of the Sanhedrin, an incredibly well-known tomb, he was actually buried in. The Romans knew about it, the Jews knew about it, those who professed faith in Christ knew about it. So, scholars don't disagree with that. They say that yes, there was a well-known tomb, and that it ended up being empty. Scholarship agrees on that. Then scholarship agrees that these disciples, Peter and others, actually had an experience with Jesus Christ and had tremendous life change. Who was persecuting Christians the most at that time? Paul. Well, Nero too, yeah. Paul, and all of a sudden, he turned from Saul to Paul, a total identity crisis because he had an encounter with the risen Jesus Christ. There's no other way to explain that historically than if he had some type of encounter. Maybe he was on some type of hallucinogenic. Most likely not. Most likely he had this encounter. Next would be understanding that it was women actually to the tomb that found Jesus first. Josephus and many other secular scholars were making a mockery of that. They said Christians are actually claiming that women did it? That's a total joke. Over here, the Romans were torturing women to death who were Christians because they thought women were just trash and dirt. Next would be this explosion of the early church. It didn't make any sense that Jews actually had to jump through so many hoops. They thought there'd be a general revelation at the end of time, definitely not a single revelation, and definitely not Jesus Christ in weakness, dying and actually rising from the dead. And now you have thousands of Jews becoming Christians overnight based off of not Facebook's beautiful proclamation of gender identities or something that's very attractive, based off of something that they claim to see, and then based off of those who actually got the eyewitness testimony. So Luke, for example, said, I'm giving an orderly account. In that day and age, orderly meant to take it tremendously seriously in the sense of I am giving you the evidence. So it's all about evidence. It's not about blind faith. It's not about gullibility. You, my friend, have to come up with, okay, that didn't happen. What did happen? Because we're both detectives on a crime scene. You can't just say, I don't know, and the burden of proof is simply on me. The evidence clearly shows that no, most likely he actually did rise from the dead. And he was doing miracles. He was claiming to do miracles. He did them. He was living in a supernatural kind of way. You even have secular sources claiming that he claimed to do miracles, and he did do miracles. Now, I know that there was absolutely more of a little bit of an understanding of the supernatural could happen, more likely than our day and age, but you even had enemy attestation to his supernatural claims. That's weird. At the very least, you gotta...
It's not really weird in my opinion. It's just
weird.
what happens when you're a really good liar.
The message of Jesus is that he came, lived a perfect, sinless life, faced every temptation that we do, every single one, every temptation, whatever it is, whether it's temptation for money, sex, power, whatever it is, he faced all those temptations, lived a perfect life, showed that their perfect love is real, demonstrated that at the cross, that there is no greater love than when one gives their life for another. So he took the penalty for my sin. I still live with the consequences of my sin, right, in this messed up world, but the penalty is taken, and so therefore, as I trust in Jesus, I'm never going to get it perfect. It's not that I don't, like, I missed church one Sunday, and then I fall out of faith with God,
Okay,
right?
so-
It's more, okay, how am I actively living it out every day and realizing I'm not perfect, and so I need a perfect Savior.
Is it completely inconceivable that someone would think that Jesus dying as a martyr and then the story of him coming back as a follower of Jesus, the story of him coming back being fabricated and created, would then send this religion forward as a movement like, this is what we need to do. I'm going to carry the burden of spreading this lie. I'm going to make this story. I'm going to have Jesus have come back from the dead so that his legacy, his story, his life lives on. He was a Jewish rabbi. He had incredible ideologies. He had a new kind of way to do Judaism, which is like, I'm half Jewish, half Indian. I've been raised around many different religions. It makes sense why they would want his message to stay alive.
Those first century eyewitnesses of Christ claimed, we have seen Christ risen from the dead. They stood before Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers said, say Caesar is Lord and live, or else maintain that your Jesus is Lord and die. And every single one of them said, I have seen Jesus Christ risen from the dead, and they died for what they claimed to have seen. People don't die to cover up what they know to be a lie. And if they made it up, Jesus rose from the dead, they never would have died to cover up what they knew to be a lie.
I'd like to invite you to Grace Community Church, located at 365 Lukeswood Road in New Canaan, Connecticut. Our services are at 9:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. on Sundays. Hope you can join us.